Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live town hall with Executive Director David Howse. My name is Blair Nodelman, and I use she, they pronouns. I'm a member of the marketing team here at ArtsEmerson and will be helping to moderate this conversation, along with Maggie, who is part of our guest experience team. This conversation will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so those who are not able to join us live can watch it later. That being said, we'd love for you to keep your cameras on, but if you prefer not to be recorded, feel free to turn your cameras off. We also ask that you keep your microphones muted and unmute when you're invited to do so. The video and mute buttons can be found in the bottom left corner of your Zoom window. If you have a question or a comment, please feel free to either message me or Maggie directly in the Zoom chat to be added to the queue. The chat button is located in the bottom of your Zoom window. If you don't wish to ask your question on camera, please let us know and I will read it for you. Of course, if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to message us. Also, for the best viewing experience, we recommend using Speaker View, which can be located in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom window. And without further ado, here is David Howse.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so many familiar faces, and we're going to jump in and get started. Apologies for the delay. We were waiting for the interpreter who might join us at any moment. So we're going to get started, but I'm going to begin by offering a land acknowledgement. ArtsEmerson resides on an ancestral and unceded lands of the Massachusetts people whose name was appropriated by this Commonwealth and on whom violence is perpetrated in the name of this country. We pay respect to the Massachusetts elders, past, present, and future, the traditional custodians of these lands, and we commit to uncovering the truth. Please use these next few minutes of silence to honor those custodial lands on which you now sit. And feel free to put those names in the chat if you're so inclined to do so. Thank you. I want to echo Blair's warm welcome and say that I've been looking forward to this time together. I know that I have stiff competition with the beautiful weather if you're in the Boston area, and I see that Steve's enjoying outside, so it's good to see you there. But I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's hard to believe that it was a year ago to this day that we presented our final live performance before the shutdown, Plate Camara's second and last performance in Boston. We had a moment of reflection at the staff meeting yesterday, and certainly the suddenness of that transition was shocking to all of us, shocking to you as well, I'm sure. But after just a couple of days, maybe a week of transitioning into our new work environments, we began to embark upon a year of experimentation, which you've heard about. And since then, we've experimented, we have tested, we've tried, we've prodded, we've fixed, we've broken, and we've learned a lot in the process, and going to be sharing just a little bit of what we've been up to today and talk a little bit through that and let you know just sort of what the format is. So we're doing something a little bit different. As you see, Blair welcomed us. We'll have some time for Q&A. And I'm going to share a few slides a little bit later, almost like, just to give some context to some of the information I'll be sharing. And then we'll just kind of open up and have a conversation. I'm just really curious to hear what you're thinking, how you're thinking about theater in this moment and also coming up. I see that my colleague David Dower is on the line as well. And his video's not on, but he's there. And it was in April. Oh, there you go. Hey, David. In April, some time ago, it was our first town hall, and that was like a duo act. And now it's a bit of a solo act today. So hard to believe that much time has passed. This is the sixth town hall that we've had. And I've been energized by the team, the staff's real commitment to making things work in spite of these challenging times. We'll talk a little about that. I'm really inspired by the response of the audience, our community, and really, really moved by the commitment of the artists to push through in spite of these incredible challenges. And so what we'll do now is we're going to move into a few slides to share a little bit about what we're up to, and then we'll take it from there. So Ari, if you want to bring up that first slide, that'd be great. Great. So here's a beautiful image of a few of the artists we've been working with, some who are familiar to you, some who may be new. If you take a look at this screen, you can see that there are many artists that are familiar to you. You can see Koa, sort of in the center, that's formerly known as Daniel Beatty. We've been working on a project with Daniel, the third in the trilogy from Emergency to Mr. Joy to this new piece, thanks to the Windows for their support on that effort. We're hoping to see something early draft in the coming days. We've also been working with Nasim Sulaimanpour. You can see sort of at the top, the third, right next to Toshi, working on a project, testing out with our audience some of the pivot from the live space to the digital space. We've been working with, let's see who else is on the screen. Of course, Esperanza Spalding, bottom left, on my screen, on an opera, contemporary opera that she's working with Frank Gehry as the designer, and Wayne Shorter is also a collaborator in that project. So, you know, it's important during these moments we continue to support our artists. And even though we couldn't bring them here, we couldn't bring them into the space for the residencies, we've been able to pivot with them and sort of meet them where they are. Many organizations, as you can imagine, have not had the capacity to actually continue to support artists during these times. And not that we're flushed in cash, because we're not, but because of your generosity, we've been able to help the artists navigate through these times. And we're looking forward to one day bringing them back into this live space with us to see some of the work. So just a sample, and again, just to say, our residencies that many of you know about come in different forms. Sometimes it's a financial contribution in the form of a commission to an artist. Sometimes it's a technical residency. Maybe it's tour planning. Maybe they need an audience to actually test out work. So we've been trying to figure out, how do we pivot in that space in this time with the artist? And that has been really a really rich experience for us. And so you'll see some of that work coming out of this pandemic moment in the coming season. Or if you want to move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about this familiar scene. You can recognize this as perhaps as the Paramount lobby. One of the things that we've had to do during the pandemic is pivot, particularly the front of house staff, the production team, and our box office to support classroom instruction in the theaters. And so this is the scene where the students are coming in and they're having a tap in to show that they've been tested and it's tested negative. So the team has been really incredible in their ability to pivot and to support the college in this way. And I will also add here that it's because of our ability to pivot that we're all still here, truly. And again, thanks to the college, we have not had to furlough or lay off any of the team. And we don't take that for granted, because we know so many of our colleagues across the country have not had that privilege. And so it's been great to be able to support the students, the faculty, and the academy in this way. And again, kudos to the staff. The production teams, many of the front of house staff, are still going in regularly. And they've been going in for the last several months. Most of our administrative team, I'd say the vast majority of the administrative team, are still in our home offices with really we don't have a time frame for when we'll return. So we're sitting, waiting patiently, and getting a lot of work done in this, this home environment. And then the next slide, things that we've been thinking about. This next slide is also familiar. This is what we used to look like when we came together. You remember that? This is what we look like and what we will look like again in some day. And we share this slide because not only have we been thinking a lot about public health, but we've also been thinking a lot about public healing. It's clear to us, and I'm inspired by the words of one of our artists from Pelota, Mark Pamuti Joseph, who gave a speech at the Under the Radar Festival in January. And he said a number of moving things, and happy to share that link with any of you who are interested. But one of the things he says, we're going to be living in a post-traumatic cloud of nervousness. A post-traumatic cloud of nervousness. So how do we actually come back together in ways that are sustaining, in ways that are building, in ways that are whole? And it's clear to us that not only do we need to be mindful of the programming, but also how we actually bring people back into space. So we're minding all the protocols, all the guidelines that we're hearing, both from the CDC, as well as from the state and from the city. And we're also very much thinking about healing in this moment, knowing the role that arts can play and trying to understand and assert the role that arts can play in healing during these periods. There was a study that was released in December of 2020 by an organization, a company called Slover Lynette, and they worked with another company called La Placa Cohen to actually get a gauge where audiences were, what were they thinking, and they actually did that work through a racial and ethnic lens, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it was overwhelming that all audiences, what they were looking for from their arts and cultural organizations was something different. They wanted organizations to change. And the three ways that they talked about that change were really being more inclusive and community-centered. They talked about wanting an organization that was more casual, more enjoyable, and they wanted to be more reflective and more dynamic content. Now, we know that healing means different things for different people. The audiences are also saying that they're looking to arts organizations, arts and cultural organizations, to help them and their communities learn how to laugh, relax, and stay connected on one hand. And on the other hand, they're also looking for a place to grieve, a place to make meaning. And so as we think about how we enter and the ecosystem of the arts and culture community, we want to be responsive to that. So we're looking forward to getting back into physical space, but also not neglecting in any way our additional venue, which is the digital platform, which hopefully all of you have been engaging. Ari, if you want to go to that next slide. We were fortunate to be a part of a cohort of Boston arts organizations that was organized through Arts Boston and in partnership with the consulting firm Wolf Brown. These organizations sent out identical surveys to segments of the audiences from past few years. The surveys were sent to random segments for 5 months in a row, and the participants were able to get a picture of how the arts-going public's perceptions shifted or did not shift over the months. And today I'll share a little bit as well. This was the first iteration of this study. There's another study that's going on as a follow-on to this one. So we'll be participating in that as well. But the data that I'm going to show you today at a very high level, and before I show you the data, let me be very clear. I am not a researcher, and nor have I mastered this data or the methodology. So we will provide a link to more information there, but just wanted to give you some highlights of what we learned. The information I'll be sharing is specific to ArtsEmerson for the most part. All right, Ari, if you can advance the slide. This, again, it's a hard to see, so we will send you the link to see. So I'll tell you what you're seeing here. This particular slide shows that there's an increase in trust in ArtsEmerson to determine when health risks are low enough for in-person events. So 34% agree strongly in June versus 50 in November. So we're seeing some progress there. And I will also say that audiences are 3 times more likely in November to trust that their fellow audience members will follow safety guidelines than they were in June. So you can see people's confidence is building as we go through this pandemic. Next slide, Ari. This particular slide is showing that in November, only 2% felt that they would attend fewer arts and culture activities than pre-pandemic, down from 14% in June. And those who felt they would attend more jumped from 17% to 21%. Again, positive signs that people are actually looking forward to coming back. You might remember when you first went into this sort of shutdown, you may not have been as eager, but as things began to unfold and we began a little bit more comfortable, then people are more inclined, which bodes well for us as we are thinking about a return sometime in the fall. Next slide, Ari. This is a good slide because those citing they were very eager to return has increased substantially as the pandemic has gone by. 36% in June versus 56% in November. And again, this is an ArtsEmerson statistic. And you can see the numbers are relatively low, but still statistically significant based on the methodology of the search firm. So we're hoping, maybe many of you are in that eager to return, and many of you have said that you are eager to return and will be there as soon as we open up the theater doors. Next slide. In November, 75% of respondents said they had watched online cultural programs in the past 2 weeks, and over half of those cited that they paid to view. Of note, markedly smaller percentage of the Boston cohort, only 57% reported watching in the same time period. And I want to pause there to say that what this is saying that ArtsEmerson audiences are watching at a higher rate than some of the other institutions here in the city. I will also say here that this number, this sort of online viewing audience is really significant. In that number, through another study that I referenced at the beginning of the call, that Slover-Lynette study through that racial lens, 75% of those online viewers have not actually stepped foot into the theaters that they're actually viewing online. And of that 75%, a significant number are people of color and notably Black audiences in that number. So that gives us a huge opportunity. We can imagine that, their financial the assumptions are the financial barriers are lower, the sort of social barriers are lower. And the opportunity for us is to learn how we transition that learning from that digital space so that we can create similar conditions in the live experience so that people are more comfortable coming and joining us in that live experience. But again, it also suggests that we shouldn't pull back on digital programming whatsoever. Not only are there more audiences across the world who are able to view, but audiences of color are actually viewing at higher rates, and a way to begin to introduce and learn from those audiences as well. Coupled with that is the fact that there are certain members of our community who will not feel comfortable coming back into the spaces so quickly. And so we want to make sure that we are providing that for others as well. And then last slide, Ari, is a slide that talks about in November, ArtsEmerson audience expressed a high interest in various forms of digital content, and again, markedly higher than the Boston cohort in each area. So for live stream theatrical production, 67% versus 53%, video on demand availability, 59 versus 51, and on-demand educational programming, 24% to 13%. And, I have to just make a shout out. Many of you have participated in the Play Reading Book Club that's led by our Akiba Baka, who's on the call, and supported by the engagement team, Kevin and Susan, who are also here. That kind of educational program is something that's been really significant for us. And we've learned a lot as we've pivoted that Play Reading Book Club to the digital space. And we'll continue to learn how to expand, amplify that without losing the intimacy and the real diversity that that program brings to our to the plate. So we can stop sharing now, Ari. Again, just a quick snapshot. I went through those pretty quickly, but the headline for me is that the things that we're learning from the audience, we have to listen deeply, particularly to those who've not always felt welcomed in the spaces, so that when we do return, it's not in the same way, and that we're trying to do something a little bit different. I can't say to you today that I know exactly what that is, so I don't know the answers to what it means to do something different. But there are things that we know we want to change. And so we're really leaning into that question for ourselves as an organization, but also listening to our audiences and our artists as we think about what might change. So you see, there's a lot that we're learning. There's a lot of information that we're taking in. We're embarking upon 2 new studies as well with other organizations, trying to gather more information from folks. One that's being supported by the Barr Foundation, that again is looking specifically at audiences of color with a focus on Black audiences. And we're doing that work with several other organizations across the state. So we'll look forward to getting more information from that. So I've talked enough, and I'm very curious to see what's resonating with you, what questions you have. I will say, as we're pivoting into the question and answer moment, we're small enough, and I think, and that we could actually maybe use the chat to post a question, or maybe I have to lean on Blair because I've forgotten exactly how we want this to happen. But I think it's small enough that we can actually maybe just come off mute and when you're identified and ask your question. Just to say, you've all heard from the state that we are allowed to open this month. But as you know, unlike some of our colleagues who can maybe flip on a switch and bring people back, our lead up time is a little bit longer. So again, we are planning on coming back in the fall, more than likely late fall. It's so much up in the air, so much is still uncertain. But when we do come back, it will both be in the live experience as well as the digital platform, both talking to each other. And we will also continue to be amplifying our film which also lives in that digital space. So the good news, we're coming back. We can't tell you when because we don't know exactly yet, and we are working on a season that's going to be fully expressive of ArtsEmerson. All right, I'm going to stop talking and invite you, if you're so moved, to come back on camera so so we can see each other or not, and maybe see what questions you have.
So David, the first question is, someone wants to know, how's your spirit? And what do you need from the audiences at this moment?
How is my spirit? Today it's lifted because I'm with you, and most days I would say the good days outweigh the bad days. But I'm encouraged. I mean, it's been a tough go. I don't want to downplay that aspect. It's been challenging for all of us. But you know what we look for and what inspires us and really keeps us going is interaction, one, with the artist. So that anytime I'm on a call with an artist, I'm totally psyched that hearing what they're working on, the questions they're asking, the challenges they're dealing with, and the solutions that they're coming up with lifts my spirits. And certainly being able to hear from the audience is because we can't make these shifts in a vacuum. So we want to hear from you. We want you to experience the work. We want to tell you we want to hear from you, what's working, what's not working, what are your concerns about returning, because that's what keeps us going. When that line of communication stops, our purpose is stunted. So we do want to hear from you, and that's really what gives me a lot of hope. The fact that the vaccine is probably moving, I have to say, is incredibly encouraging. It was a little bit haphazard, but I'm thinking they're getting the kinks out, and so that certainly is hopeful. That warm weather also kind of lifts the spirit. So, but the truth is, human connection is what lifts my spirits, and so I'm looking forward to some outdoor walks with patrons and friends of ArtsEmerson before we can actually be in that lived experience. So thank you for asking. I can't speak for the full team, but for me, I'm feeling encouraged by what we're learning and the energy that we're putting into coming back in a meaningful and authentic way.
Our next question is from Paul Ballinger. So if you would like to turn on your video and your camera, you can ask your question to David directly.
Hi, David.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Terry.
Can you talk generally how ArtsEmerson is doing financially?
Yes, I can speak specifically ArtsEmerson, and I can also speak more generally about arts and culture, performing arts organizations in general. I will say that ArtsEmerson is doing well. This has been a banner year for fundraising. Thanks to Shannon, who's on the call, and the team. You all have been more generous this year. You've stepped up in meaningful ways. And that, coupled with the fact that we don't have the expense of live theater, we are balancing out quite well. So, and I think that is the trend for most organizations. I was just on a call yesterday with Susan Nelson from TDC, who's they do a lot of financial strategy for many organizations. And she was saying across the board, arts and cultural organizations, particularly performing organizations, are coming in with pretty significant surpluses this year. I can't say that we have a significant surplus, but we're doing okay. But there are organizations with significant surpluses, and how you actually mine that surplus, because this year was a banner year. We don't know what next year is going to look like from a fundraising standpoint and a financial standpoint. We do know that we can't expect our numbers, our audience numbers, our ticket sales to just go back to normal. So we're looking at a 2 to 3, maybe 4 year sort of arc before something feels like the finances have sort of work themselves out. So yes, we're doing fine, and thanks due in part to the college, again, which is supports us on so many levels, with the subsidy, but with the space as well. So we're doing well and hoping to continue on that front as we move in. But we know that ticket sales will be lower, so we'll be calling on folks to say, please step up again as we go through this bridge. Next year is really going to be a bridge to what is really that 2022-23 season, where we're going to be hopefully fully back on stage.
Great.
Thank you. That's a good question, Paul.
Our next question is from Andy Kopel.
I don't see Andy.
I will ask the question on his behalf.
So, do you want me to speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I'm just interested in what you're thinking of presenting in the next year or so. In other words, I know that with all of these challenges and all these obstacles, what is it that is we can reasonably expect you might be able to present given all the contingencies?
So thank you for that question, Andy. Some of the things that you'll see in next season won't be a surprise to you. We've made the commitment to our artists that we were supposed to present last year. We're trying to maintain those relationships, and so some of those works I don't think I'm giving anything away. We huge fans of Toshi Regan and her work at Parable of the Sower. That was something we were committed to presenting, so we're trying to bring that work back. And so what you'll see in the season is maybe a smaller sort of version, but fully expressive of ArtsEmerson. So we're looking at contemporary circus projects. We're looking at contemporary music theater projects. We're looking at mixed media. So it'll be a smaller season in person, but fully expressive of ArtsEmerson. And again, Andy, we are making plans as if we will have the right conditions to come back, backstage protocols, front of house protocols, so that we can safely convene. We don't know what the social distancing will be inside the theater. We're still waiting for that information, but it will be a fully expressive season, just truncated with ArtsEmerson. I hesitate to give more titles or be more specific because we're still in negotiation with artists who, as you can imagine, are also navigating and wanting to figure their own schedules out. So I don't want to get more specific than that, but we will be announcing our season. I might add maybe kind of not your typical season. We usually wrap up in May. We may think of our season extending. And by the way, what is a season? So it may extend into June, July. And so we're still figuring those pieces out. And the live portion may not start until November, because we want to clear as much space for all the kinks to be worked out so we can, as much as possible, mitigate having to reschedule a lot of programming.
Well, thank you. That's fair and actually very reassuring. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Our next question is from Robert Thur, if you would like to unmute.
Hello,
Hi,
Bob.
David. Thank you very.
Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now. Okay.
It's great to see you, and thank you. My question revolves around our international partners. What are the special challenges that you're facing working with our international groups, and will they be returning to the theater at the same pace as the domestic ones?
Oh, if I had a crystal ball, Bob, I would tell you that answer. But I will say this, we are super committed, like uber committed to our international partners. And I will put that in the context very early on. And David, if you want to say something about this, very early on during the pandemic, we were hearing from our other US-based international presenting colleagues, not all, but a number, thinking about pulling back a little bit because of the complication, because of the cost, because of the uncertainty, and focusing more local, which we're totally about local. We support that, but we have such an important role to play on the international front. And so we have been supporting those international artists during the pandemic, and we are making plans for them to return. We just made a call to our sort of visa attorney yesterday, just to get a sense of what is that going to be like. So the embassies aren't open yet, but they are going to be starting to issue visas in, sometime perhaps over the summer. So we're learning as much, we're planning. We're thinking about 2 or 3, if that sounds right, maybe a few more in the coming season that are international. It may not be a production of 40 people, it may be much smaller, but we are making those plans and making provisions in case something shifts. But just to say, there's a group of us that David corral across the country, really fighting to hold on to and advocate for international presenting in the most fundamental and important way in this particular moment. So you will see, both in the digital space, you'll see international work, as well as in the live performance. And again, cautiously optimistic here. So I can't promise anything, but we're cautiously optimistic.
Great. Our next question is from Victoria Dozier, if you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Hello, Victoria.
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good to hear you.
Wonderful. I just wanted to find out what kind of takeaways have you learned from the pandemic, and what do you plan to take from those takeaways in the future in your ArtsEmerson? And the last thing I want to know is, will you continue your diversity conversations?
Okay, well, let me start at the end and say, without reserve, absolutely. So much of the work that we are focused on as a team, particularly in this moment, is not a George Floyd reaction. This is the work of making sure that our audiences are fully reflexive of the city, which requires us to have conversations that may make us uncomfortable around race, around gender, around accessibility. So we are very much a part of that conversation, and you'll be hearing some of that in the town hall series that you'll hear more about, but also be hearing about that from the artists. And as you know, Victoria, we have our Gaining Ground Fund, which is supporting artists whose work reflected African diasporic experience in America. And so that is actually also growing as well. So our commitment is unwavering on that front. And I think it's important for us to do so. And in many ways, ArtsEmerson is trying to model what it means to be both authentic in our discourse and in our practices. We're not perfect, but we're learning and happy to share those learnings. I think the key takeaway from this pandemic is that the arts will thrive and survive. I keep saying that we are still here in so many ways. It was so easy for arts to be even more marginalized during this pandemic. But the fact that people are actually clamoring for meaning making really makes it incumbent upon us to do everything that we can to continue to serve our communities in the best way that we know how. So that's one of the takeaways, not a surprise, but I was encouraged, and certainly encouraged by the data that's coming back, by what people are looking for. The other thing, and this is quite more inward focused, but I also just was reminded of the importance of culture and the importance of values in these moments. And the team, again, we haven't seen each other together for over a year, but the commitment of the team to continue to deliver, to pivot, to learn, to change, to shift in these moments has been incredibly encouraging, and to make sure that we're investing in that together. And the last thing I would say is I've just learned how wonderful the ArtsEmerson community is, how generous, how supportive, and how sustaining, both on the artistic side as well as on the community audience side. And so we're trying to take all that learning and actually think about what it means for us as we come back into the proximity to each other, hopefully in the fall.
Our next question is from Ann Texiera. If you could unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, David. You've answered part of it in response to Victoria, but the other part of it is how you're thinking about this desire of people. It seems to be across the performing arts, not just theater, but for friendlier and more casual experiences. How do you see operationalizing that?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that question, and though it feels insignificant, the fact that I don't have a jacket on, the fact that I have this shirt on and not a jacket and a tie actually creates that experience. But I'm going to give kudos to our front of house staff and our guest experience staff led by Matt Harrington, and certainly our box office staff led by Jamie Siebenthaler and supported by Brittany and others, Kieran and Melissa, I don't want to forget anybody, have already created an experience for so many people that's welcoming and that is trying to help people understand that this is a place where they belong. So we're going to be leaning more into that. The fact that David and I, before we had to sort of go home, would stand in the lobby and greet people as they came in, simple gestures like that. And now we have to help our audiences understand what it means for us to actually help others feel like this is a place that they belong. We are a public institution. We belong to all the people. not just those who've been coming for a very long time. And we have space for everybody, right? So we're thinking about what it means to show up. How are we extending that invitation? How artists are participating in extending that invitation. You've heard us talk about our demand building program, where we're using the artists to be in conversation with artists, I mean, with the audience, to make that invitation. So we're thinking a lot about what that looks like, and we'll be testing a lot of things out. Again, year of experimentation. When we get back, we're going to test some things out to see if we can create even a more inclusive and sort of relaxed experience for our audiences. And if you have any ideas, not just you, Anne, but others, I mean, let us know, because again, we are going to be experimenting with a lot, because we have to figure out how our institutions, how our theaters are a place for everybody.
Exactly. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Welcome.
Great. And our next question is from Charles Baldwin.
Excellent. Hi, Charles.
Hi, David.
Good to see you.
Excited to be in the room. I haven't seen you, and I haven't seen a few of the folks on the call that I don't know in a long while, and it's great, and I have full confidence in what you guys are doing. My name is Charles Baldwin. For those of you who can not see me, I'm an older white guy with glasses, a beard, and a mohawk. I'm calling in from my studio in Somerville, which is, of course, an ancestral home of Indigenous folks, both Massachusetts and the, it's a middle ground, Middlesex area. So we got Wampanoag, Nipmuc, anyway. My question, which I want to jump into, is hearing about the community work that you've been doing, not in the future, but what you've been doing. I know data collection is always fun, but I love the play reading program, and I'd love to hear more about what that's been doing over the last couple of months.
Absolutely, that's a great question. And I am going to cold call Akiba, if you're listening, because Akiba Abaka actually is the mastermind behind that program and has been leading the pivot to the digital space. And I know several of you, Joan, you've been in the digital space with us on PRBC, yes. And so maybe have Akiba share just a few thoughts about what we've been doing to pivot, Play Reading Book Club, and sort of what your thoughts are about how we're moving into the future.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, Akiva.
Uncle Charles, by the way. So we did experiment with an online version of the Play Reading Book Club, and just a literacy moment for members of our community who are on the call, who do not know what the Play Reading Book Club is. Picture a standard book club meets a show of the month club, where people gather together and decide that they're going to go see a show and then have drinks after, meets a table read, which in the industry is the first day of rehearsals for a play. It's the day when the actors and the designers and the director and everybody who's investing in the play sit around the table and crack open the script together, and there's a big read. And then the dramaturgical, which is the researcher in the room, the person who makes sure that the script is literarily sound, meet. So the way the program works is, so picture those three elements put together. That is the ArtsEmerson Play Reading Book Club. So the way the program works is that audiences get an opportunity to read the play out loud as if they were the acting company. And then they are guided by a team of teaching artists who take them through a deep study of the text and all of the geographical, chronological, everything surrounding the play. And then they go to see the play together. They choose an evening, and they're treated to a private audience with the artist. And then they get to go back to their communities, because this program prior to COVID was neighborhood based. We would work with the libraries and the community centers, and sometimes some schools to host it. So they go back to you go back to your community, and then you get to be the acting company. You get to perform an excerpt of the script in a reading, a staged reading of the script for your community. So that's the Play Reading Book Club. It is an incredible experience. Joan Lancourt, who is a member of the original, what we call affectionately known at the ArtsEmerson team as the Dudley Gang, the original Dudley Play Reading Book Club. We started this at the Dudley Branch Library. So we adapted it to the virtual space and added several elements. So we had this idea of a lobby gathering space, and then to replicate the feeling of being out in the neighborhoods, we had breakout rooms. And then we added another element where the teaching artists worked together in their deep study of the text and presented a workshop, each teaching artist taking a different aspect of the play and presenting it as a workshop. The online version was very successful because of the gods. For some reason, we were able to, the gods being the people who financed the Play Reading Book Club, we were able to maintain the sense of the community. Joan can speak to that. We were able to maintain a sense of community, a sense of connectivity, and sense of wanting to be in a space, wanting to gather. We did study 2 plays this season, and we will be moving forward to keeping the digital version. And now that the libraries are starting to reopen, we're going to do the libraries again. So we'll have both. One area that Joan can speak to is that one of the benefits of our program is that we offered it for free in the libraries. And that was to ensure that people who did not have access or were not used to going to the theater would be able to do so. And we did notice the one great opportunity was the opportunity to grow and diversify our audiences. We saw that in the Play Reading Book Club, there were audiences of color and people that we usually see in the libraries who were not able to be a part of the online version. And that could have been because of maybe not having the internet connection at home. And one final thing I'll say is that we are adding an element called the adapter. So those who do not have the internet connection at home will be able to go to some sites in the neighborhood where they can do the program. So long story short, but here's the thing, the book club is long.
I needed to hear. I
Yeah.
want, because I know that work has gone on and community still is there. And the program is already so rich that it's the connection that people want and need. So I'm really happy to hear that it's, still moving along, and the barrier of technology and Wi-Fi is real. Yeah.
I'll just say
a wonderful resource.
Something that you're saying, Charles, is what's beautiful about the Play Reading Book Club, in addition to the rich content and the community, is the human connection. And in this pandemic moment, not only are we looking to see shows and have that kind of one-way experience, but we're also looking to connect. And the Play Reading Book Club provides that opportunity and will continue to do so. And so how you actually create that same sense of community in the digital space as you do in the lived and live experience is what we're really testing out. And the Play Reading Book Club, as I said, is really a great example of how it can be done well.
Yeah, and I just want to briefly say thank you for inviting me to this meeting, because as far as community connection, to see you and Akiba and know that David Dower's on the call, it's really nice to see you guys. So thank you.
Good to see you as well, Charles. Thank you for being here. I think we have a couple more questions. Blair?
Sure. So our next question, I will read. We've been really grateful over the years that ArtsEmerson has long been engaged in the work of presenting and representing experiences of marginalized communities and in doing wide local outreach. As we've seen many other arts organizations start to engage in that work since June, have you been able to help some of those organizations learn from your experience?
Oh, that's a good question. How would I answer that? I would say that ArtsEmerson's journey into supporting artists whose voices have been marginalized and not actually valued. Our early foray into that has, I think, had a positive influence here in the community. I dare to claim that we've created a movement because, again, this is much larger than ourselves. No one has necessarily called me and said, help us think about this. But I can't help to say that the moment, coupled with there being some charted course through our work, that people have been able to find their way maybe more easily. But I don't want to claim something that I can't really, that we as an organization can't claim, but I do hope it's been a positive. Our work with immigrant communities, our work with international artists, our work pushing the boundaries of theater has been influential here in the community and abroad. We do hear that. But hopeful, but I can't say for certain that we have been helpful to anyone in particular.
Great. And our last question is from Ellen Gittleman. If you would like to unmute and ask your question, Ellen.
Hi, David.
Hi.
And everyone else. My question was, I have two parts actually, and I may have missed one part, but how do we make theater more accessible to people of all socioeconomic backgrounds? I mean, it seems to be something that maybe people with money can afford. And then also, how are you planning on diversifying age groups? Because theater in general, I don't know, maybe ArtsEmerson is more diverse, but theater in general tends to attract any kind of performance, even movies, tends to attract older people. So I was wondering, if that's something you've learned over during the pandemic. Have you thought long and hard about that? Or, I mean, it's a challenge that everybody's been having. So
yeah, and the challenges that you're raising, Ellen, and they're really important ones, are pre-pandemic challenges. So the barriers to theater, arts and culture in general, or I should say the barriers to arts and culture as we think about it, because there's arts and culture embedded in all of the communities. And so it exists, but having people come into our cultural organizations is a challenge. I alluded to it earlier, there are financial barriers, but also, and just as equal as the financial barriers, the social barriers. These have not been places that they were actually designed to keep out and not necessarily bring in. And so there has to be a community-wide commitment to transforming the way that we think about the places and who owns those places. So I don't have any brilliant ideas. I know that we've done a lot, as have other organizations, to create access points, so there are always initiatives where we try to reduce that financial barrier, through our work. And thank you, Julia, who is here as interpreting, trying to make it more accessible to people with disabilities, so that they have a space and it's not an add-on, but just a normal part of our practice. And we're also doing the work with culture around understanding what has prevented these places from coming and to being a place that belongs to everybody. So that work is certainly continuing for us. And for the gender challenge, again, we're not unique in the struggle that we have, even though we sit inside of a college, right? And so we haven't figured that out. We're not where we want to go, but it's something that we do think about. We work very closely with a number of faculty members on engaging students, because they're right here in front of us, because the programs are free for those students. And so we're often thinking about it, but no brilliant answers just yet.
the second half of my
Oh, Ellen, you went on mute, sorry.
the second part of my question sort of relates to that. Are you planning on doing any kind of virtual programming going forward, so that that could actually reduce the cost somewhat, because then you don't have to pay for lights and.
Yeah, no, at the top of the call, and I had mentioned.
I missed that.
No, that's okay.
Sorry, yeah,
Happy to repeat it, because it's good news. We will be continuing the digital programming for the unforeseeable future. So we're going to continue to go for that. And the statistic I want to share with you, Ellen, that I mentioned earlier, is that 75% of the people who are engaging online content have not actually walked into the physical space. And the majority of those people are people of color with market number of Black people. Again, and the assumptions are because it's a decreased financial barrier, it's decreased social sort of impediments. And so we are looking to figure out, is that transferable? How can you transfer that experience to the live experience? As you know, the digital platform, I don't know that anyone's figured out how to monetize it. And so we're going to have to figure out how to be able to maintain that at the same time as we try to build up the audience, rebuild the audience, I should say, in the live experience. Okay, Blair, how are we doing?
We are good. We have about 5 minutes left. If there is anything that you would like to include at the end here, David.
Well, I'll sort of close us out. I want to honor your time. It's almost 6 o'clock. And, you know, I didn't have a lot of time here today, but to hear from you, what are you looking for when you return? What are you interested in? What are you hoping for? What are you nervous about? That's really important to us. You know, we hear through surveys, but to hear from you directly, an email, a chat on the phone, we'd love that. We'd love to hear from you. I just want to share before we get off that there are some opportunities that you want to keep in mind if you haven't seen Brimful of Asha. It opened on Tuesday night. It is delightful. It's brilliant. I've seen it a number of times. It's on demand through March 22nd. So you'll want to take a look at that. In our virtual screening room, our April Shared Stories series will feature Lachana, followed by the short After Dark. That starts on Wednesday, March 12th at 7. And then the opening screening will be followed by live conversations with the filmmakers. And then the Shared Stories is a monthly film series where we present Boston Asian American Film Festival, Boston Latino International Film Festival, and the Roxbury International Film Festival all together. And we're seeking to build community shared conversation experiences through cinema by creating a shared space for conversation. And then lastly, I'd say save the date for the next town hall, which is Tuesday, April 13th at 5. And we'll be sending out more information around what we'll be talking about the Royal Week, because it's just me, what we'll be talking about in April. So I want to, again, thank you all for taking the time to be with me and the team. There are a lot of people behind the scenes that you can't see. I want to say a special thanks to Blair, who our moderator, as well as to Maggie for navigating behind the scenes. A special thanks to Julia, our interpreter, for being with us today, as well as all the folks, Ari, Lizzie, Kathy, Wayne, Kevin, so many people, Akiba for speaking today. So many people make this work possible, and also you make it possible. And so it makes me feel really good to see us all coming together again. And again, this is not where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be like sitting across from with a glass of wine or something. Those were the days. We'll get back there, and I look forward to it. But I just want to say, stay close. Continue to follow www.artsemerson.org. I think you all know it well. You'll find a lot of content there. And we certainly look forward to the time when we can come back together safely. In the meantime, you'll see us online, and we look forward to seeing you as well. So with that, I bid you happy Friday evening, and hopefully the sun is still kind of out. Maybe you'll get out to do your walk. It's good to see you all. Thank you, and take good care.